Great to see everybody here. And I say great to see everybody here. We've got a room full of chat. Most of the people in the chat discussing, are there technical issues? Should I hear something? Hopefully you can hear me now. And I'm looking forward very much to being with you today on this initial session. But I just want to quickly introduce the idea of the Learning Technologies Autumn Forum as a whole. We have 4 sessions. We're running on the 17th, 19th, 24th, and 26th of the month. That's Tuesday, Thursday this week, Tuesday, Thursday next week. And there are 3 sessions each day at 10, 12, and 2 UK time. Great to have you with us. Lovely to see people responding in the chat and saying, welcome, lovely to be kicking off. Lovely to be with you. Now listen, if you're on LinkedIn and you're watching this on the live stream on LinkedIn, great to have you with us. This is the only session I think that's going to be broadcast via LinkedIn. So if you want to join us for the rest of the sessions, then for a couple of moments, we'll drop the link to register into the chat and you can pick up on that and you can register and see the rest of the events. Okay, that's probably enough of me introducing the Learning Technologies Autumn Forum online this year, back, I think, probably to a physical session next year. Let's crack on with, I like Joe's comment, happy LT Day. I think we should have an LT Day officially in the calendar. Andrew, shall we kick off this morning's first session?
I think we should, Don. How are you? You all good?
I'm good. Well, you always have a deep voice. I've got a slightly deep voice this morning as a result of getting to bed a bit late last night. But delighted to be here. Delighted to be kicking off with Learning Technologies Autumn Forum for 23.
Delighted to have the opportunity to chair your session, so to speak. It's for everybody who doesn't know me, my name's Andrew Jacobs, and I'm here just to keep an eye on the chat so that Don can focus on getting all the good stuff out to you. So I'll be in the chat just seeing what's going on.
I thought you were going to say I'm here just to keep an eye
on with the voice as well.
Yeah, and I thought you were going to say I'm here to keep an eye on Don, which worried me for a second. But you do keep an eye on me. Make sure I'm running to time like a good chair should. And hi to Leanne, who's joining us from Nairobi, Kenya, and Paula from Glasgow. Rachel's in Warrington. Lovely to have all these coming in, and it's great to have to know that we are always a really international body. And please look, get to know each other in the chat. Get to link in with each other as well. We are part of a community. Let's support each other. Andrew, shall we crack on with this morning's session? I've got quite a lot of slides, and we want to be able to deal with the Q&A at the end and during as well.
Absolutely, Don. I think off you should go.
All right, let's crack on then with this morning's session. And good evening to Jeffrey, who is joining us from Singapore. Thank you so much. People from all over the world joining us, and that's great to see. I want to talk to you today about emerging learning technologies. The theme of the whole of Learning Technologies Autumn Forum this year is about new technologies and the support it gives for people learning in the workplace. There's a lot of noise about learning technologies. There's a lot of fuss about it. I want to try to identify what I think are 7 important learning technologies for the future. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you for your views about what they are. Sorry, just one second. Just trying to find my clicker here. There we go. So the trick is with these learning technologies is to identify the signal in the noise. So there's noise in there. We want to make sure that we identify the important stuff in the noise. This is me, by the way, background to me, but I think there's sufficient content to get through today that we won't dwell too much on Don Taylor, except that I've been around for a long time. So I've been doing this learning technologies lark since probably the mid-1980s, when I started programming in 1981, delivering training in 1987. So I've been doing it all my working adult life. And that gives me a long-term perspective on things. There's always people saying this is the latest, greatest, newest thing every year. But I do believe for various reasons that right now we're going through a fundamental shift in not just learning technologies, but how technology affects our life generally. So I'm going to push on with telling you about what I think some of those technologies are, but I'm going to start with the question. Alexandra has asked, can we download the slides? Yes, you can download them. They will be available afterwards, but also the last slide that I'll show today, Alexandra, will be a QR code where you can download the slides immediately. So yeah, by all means, take notes if you want to, but don't worry about missing anything. I want to start by asking everybody in the room a question. I'm going to have a sip of water. And I'm going to ask you this question. What was the greatest single emerging technology in workplace learning and development right now? And while I'm thinking about that, I'm just wanting to answer a couple of the questions that I've seen coming up. Dave has said, will the sessions be available later? And the answer is yes. The sessions will be available later via this platform. You just come back here and they're available straight away afterwards on the page from tomorrow morning. Okay, so the questions live and everyone's coming in. AI, generative AI, chat GPT, says Andres. Gen AI. Now, of course, AI is going to be the popular choice, not just because it's hot, but also it's very quick to type. So it's just 2 letters. So we've got a lot of people coming in. I'm not going to, all adult life will be working the way things are going, says Kay. Yeah, I'm not, I think you're right there, Kay. Sadly, let's see if we can work against it. Gen AI, but also academies, says Lee. Generative AI, Liz points out it's not just ChatGPT, there are other forms. All right, now, the full title of this session was Emerging Learning Technologies brackets. It's more than just generative AI. Roger's talking about data security, Matt about analytics, David adaptive digital platforms, as Elzbieta. And so we've got some other ones coming through now because AI is the quick one that comes through. Interactive training, says Charlotte. VR, says Paul. And I'm prepared to believe actually that for everybody in their particular circumstances, the answer will be different. So it may be that in your particular context of where you are in your company, in your culture, whatever it is, a particular type of technology will be important. I like Edwin's point. Gen AI highlights the real importance of human intelligence, and we're going to talk about that a bit later on. All right. I'm going to press on. Andrew, if it's okay with you, I'm going to press on with the presentation, but please keep an eye on the chat. We've got some great thoughts coming through, so please do keep your thoughts coming through. And also use the chat to raise questions, which Andrew will then either save for the end, or he may interrupt me and ask the question during the presentation if he thinks it's the right time to do it. Andrew, are we good to go on, do you think?
I was just going to add on. So I asked ChatGPT what the greatest single emerging technology in workplace L&D is right now, and that said it was VR AR, because it only does everything up to 2022. So if you want to have an understanding of what's making the biggest impact now, well, even ChatGPT doesn't recognise itself. So there's something very, very peculiar there as to how quickly it's come. And
that's a really, really good point, Andrew. Fantastically illustrative. Love it. Thank you so much. Andrew just dropped his note in there about that. Okay, let's get back to this presentation then. Thank you for that. I'm going to deal with 3 points today, and we'll look at change, chaos, and revolution because we feel, I think, probably there's quite a lot of this going on at the moment. I want to look at the emerging technologies. I want to end, though, with a point about consistency in L&D and generally with technology, which I hope will resonate. Let's just bring back this important point that the slides will be available to download later on. There's 2 QR codes. This is my final slide there on the left. 2 QR codes, one of which is to link in with me and the other of which is to download the slides. So that's going to be the last slide we have up when we've got questions. There are also probably about 7 slides of links. I'm going to give a lot of name checks to different companies and different people doing things. They will all be referenced in the back, and even there'll be references to companies I don't mention as well. So please do download the slides, and please do look at those references. You don't have to give the URL. Sorry, you don't have to give your email to download the slides, by the way. Just click there and it goes straight through to the slides in a PDF format. Okay, let's look at the first of these things then. Change, chaos, and revolution. Now, when we think about revolution, then we tend to think about things like, this is the classic painting by Eugène Delacroix, Liberty Guiding the People. And it's a great painting, hangs in the Louvre. It's our sort of idea of revolution, that things go along in a certain way, as they always have been, and that almost overnight something happens, there's an eruption, we come up and we overcome, something changes. All right. Kay has asked the question, click where for the slides? The QR code for downloading the slides will be available at the end. Okay, so that just hang on and for 50 minutes and you can download the slides. I want to ask the question, is this sense that revolution happens instantly, that it happens overnight, is it realistic? And the answer is no. There are always things that lead up to it. And looking at where we start from, the origin, and where the revolution happens, there's a couple of steps, I think, in the middle. They apply for actual political revolutions, they apply for technological revolutions as well. You have a pen and paper on the one side of this, on the other side, you've got a computer. In the middle, lots of things happen. It doesn't happen overnight. So for me, there are at least two steps in the middle to take us from our origin to our revolution. Don't worry, we're going to get to the technologies in a minute. I want to look at 7 particular emerging technologies, but I want to do it using this framework. The origin is the original state that we're in. Then we have execution. With the execution bit, we just do the old thing a bit better. Then we have evolution. We do the old thing in a new way. And finally, with the revolution, we do new things in a new way. For the French Revolution, that was an enormous sweeping set of changes, but it wasn't there overnight. A lot of things happened on the way to get to that point. Let me use an illustration of music technology to get us there. So when I was a kid growing up, I had, like lots of kids, a radio cassette player in the 1970s. And that's the original state for me. Of course, the original state will be different depending on where you start from. How do you do that better? Well, you do it better by having a boombox, which literally just does everything a radio cassette player does, but louder. It's just more of it. It's bigger, it's louder. And as one of the reactions to that was the chairman of Sony got so tired of kids in his park having these boomboxes that he said, guys, can you go and create something which will stop this? Create something which will put a cassette in and people listen to it individually. And the Sony Walkman was born. It was truly an evolution that stepped away from execution. It was personal. It certainly had the functionality of the boombox, the radio, and the cassette typically, but you carried it around with you yourself. That was a big change. It was an evolution. You were doing the old thing in a new way. And then finally, what happened next? You had the revolution, the Apple iPod, which was really revolutionary. You did new things in a new way. The new things were so many things. And it was really about the shift in not how you listen to the music, because you're doing that actually the same way as you are with the Walkman. You're walking around with your music and you're listening to it personally. So that's the same, the functionality. What the new thing is that everything is now digital and electronic rather than analog, as it was with the Sony Walkman. I don't want to get too bogged down in this because obviously, we all have our own reminiscences of what it was like to be going through this or not, or your experience of listening to music. But I want to point out, just make this point, that revolutions don't happen overnight. In the middle, in these stages, getting from the origin to the revolution, a number of things occur which are essential for the revolution to be successful. In particular, individuals need to have new behaviors. And that was a huge change. Shifting from something being broadcast to you or you having a cassette for it to you having personal control over things was a huge change. And that relies on technology and a vast amount of infrastructure just to make that little thing portable. Or now, of course, you do it on your phone. The impact of this is that you end up with a device or a technology which is very often fetishized. When I say fetishized, I mean we see it as being more than it is. It sort of exemplifies something. It embodies properties that it doesn't really have, but we give it those properties. And so we see the iPod as being transformational in a number of ways, but in a way that's nonsense because it's just a bit of metal. But in other ways, it's quite sensible because it does embody things which are very different. The revolution of digital music, which isn't just about the iPod, but it meant a whole suite of things, which I would love to sit down and talk over in a pub someday with everybody and just go into this in detail, how different our relationship with music is now to what it used to be. But we're not here to talk about music. We're here to talk about learning technology. So what does all this have to do with LT? Well, if we think about those same 4 steps in terms of learning content delivery, for example, then we started when I was training, it was you had a whiteboard and you had a marker pen. Then you had slides on the whiteboard. You moved to doing the old thing in a better way of slides on a computer screen. Maybe it's better. Then you can interact with that content on the computer screen, and then hopefully you have content that's actually adapting to you. The revolutionary bit here, content on a computer that's adapting to you, is a revolution in comparison with the origin, but each step is completely understandable. All right, so with that in mind, let me, I'm loving the chat, by the way. I'm not looking at the chat. I'm relying on Andrew to do that. We've got lovely conversation taking place in the room. Please go there. With that in mind, with that framework in mind, I'm going to go and have a look at these 7 emerging technologies. I'm going to try to get through them about 35 minutes to look at what is it that's going on in our world today, and to ask the question, are they really revolutionary? Somebody's saying they miss the OHP, the overhead projector. I quite liked an overhead projector myself, to be honest, but I'm showing my age, definitely. By the way, what I'm giving you next is not a learning technology map, all right? I'm just picking 7 that I think are important. If you want a learning technology map, please follow Danny Johnson. Danny Johnson does a fabulous job of looking at the whole learning technology landscape with her company, Red Thread Research. And she did this post, I think it was like a month ago now. And the pull-out line from it was, for me, the takeaway: learning tech is blown up, it's noisy. Now, she tries to cover the landscape of learning technology, look at all the technologies out there, categorize them, make space of them, and that's her view. She lives in this space. It's blown up, it's noisy. So if you're feeling confused, don't worry, you're not alone. People who professionally do this are in the same position. Fosway Group are also, of course, worth following. Links in the slides at the end. And Emerge Education, which is a venture capital fund that I do some work with, also publishes research that tries to look at what's going on. And they have a focus on the edtech startups in Europe. So what are the new companies coming through that it's worth looking at? So lots of different ways of keeping in touch with the marketplace. That's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is try to look at just a few technologies which are important. I have to say, generally, when I talk about what trends in learning technology, I don't mention specific companies usually, but I will mention some here because you can't avoid it. So in some of those companies, I will mention I will have an interest in. Either I'm an investor, or I'm an advisor, or Emerge Education I work with has a role with them, all right? I just want to point out that I'm not getting any financial benefit, either from mentioning them or from them getting leads that people might have as a result of this. I am, throughout my career, 40 years in this, I have never taken any money for suggesting any technology to anybody. And I think if I did, it would just be the wrong thing to do. So with that aside, let's start with what these 7 emerging technologies are that I want to look at. Content production is not really an emerging technology, but it is a whole bunch of 3 different things I'm going to look at here. Adaptive delivery, which we had mentioned in the chat. A lot of people saying that's their hot tip. Curation, I want to look at very briefly. And behavioral impact, I'm also looking at. I'm sort of split them into technologies and methodologies because although there's technology on both sides, there's more methodology with the ones on the right-hand side, and they're a bit different, and they are much more complex typically. So the ones on the left are more tactical often, the ones on the right are more strategic. First off, let's have a look at video. Now, I have to say, the video I'm going to show you is produced by me in a synthetic video, AI video company called Curation. I'm an investor and advisor to Curation. The functionality is going to be very similar to a lot of tools that you'll see out there. I've listed about 5 of them in the slides at the end. Synthesia is the most famous of these. So what you're going to see is me speaking, and I'm going to be speaking, but it's not me speaking. It's an avatar of me speaking, and it's using my voice.
How Ideas Spread in Learning and Development with Donald H. Taylor. Voting in the UK and continental Europe
and it's just
was similar,
something I prepared
behind the US.
to
India
talk about the results of
and
the Global
Australia
Sentiment Survey.
and New Zealand were far less enthusiastic.
Dit is mijn beeld, maar de stem en beweging zijn gemaakt door Curation, een tool voor kunstmatige intelligentie die synthetische video produceert.
Okay, so that's me speaking Dutch at the end, and you'll have seen this before on LinkedIn and elsewhere, people with themselves speaking as an avatar, speaking different languages, and I don't think I feel comfortable with myself speaking another language unless it's me speaking it, but you can absolutely do it, and it doesn't have to be yourself. It could be an avatar of somebody else speaking in a range of languages. And I'm going to be using this to convey the results of the Global Sentiment Survey next February, a whole suite of them, just to get it across, because it's much easier to produce. I want to look at what does this mean for us in terms of producing video and content generally. I'm going to come back in a minute to summarizing and looking at what this and the production of assets and the production of courses are like, and are they genuinely revolutionary? I think some may be, others may not be. And Andrew says, yeah, remember, this is the worst version of the technology. It will only improve. And already it's improved. I mean, I won't go into the details now, but yeah, please keep the chat going. Yeah, Kay says it still looks fake. It does. Actually, to be honest, it sounds fake, Kay, even though that's me speaking, because I was reading from a script and it sounded really, really a bit odd. I'm going to produce a new one of these for February. It will just be completely different. Yeah. And I think Leo's point is right. I think this needs to be the opening sentence of every slide. The stuff is just, it's only going to get more complex and more sophisticated. I want to look at the production of assets. When we said at the beginning, so as well as that video stuff, that's one example of it. The production of assets generally with generative AI, something we talked about right at the beginning of this, was that you can have some content that you've got, you put it through a process and you have an asset. Now, with generative AI, it can be as simple as a person creates a prompt, that then goes into a generative AI engine, could be ChatGPT, could be something else, a Midjourney, for example, and it creates an asset. And then ideally a human in the loop checks it, and then you've got your asset. I'm going to come back to this point in a second. By the way, a lot of people talking about this, about the, is it fake, isn't it fake, how does it look, and so on. James might raise a great point. It's a good starting point, and the potential is huge. And look, we could have a whole discussion about this. And I think when we look at the potential side of it, that is extraordinary when you think about what you could produce with it. But I'm going to come back to that point when I wrap up this whole bit about content in a second, because there are issues with that as well. Now, on here, this view about the human in the loop is really important. Human in the loop checks it. There's a couple of assets you might want to look at around human in the loop. It's a great phrase. Is it always going to solve the problem for us? Yes, you need a human in the loop to check things are right. Does it always solve the problem? Can they act fast enough? Well, there are issues around that, maybe not with learning, but with other uses of AI. All right, so with assets, we can produce a lot of stuff faster. Now, for me, that rings alarm bells. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Let's just talk about courses for a second. Courses, it's the same deal. You've got some content, you have a process, you put it through, it becomes a course. Now, a few years ago, the content you had was PDF or a training manual. You put it through a process, it pulled the content out, and it more or less summarized it, and that was your course. Now it's much more sophisticated. This is the situation about 2017. Now you have a large language model which contains pretty much all of which is known about a particular subject. I've seen this happen with a course being produced for project management of digital transformation. So you produce that stuff, you've got the large language model with all the content, you put it through a process where you've got sophisticated algorithms that pull content out, test it, iterate it, produced multiple choice questions with very good spoiler questions in it, produce images, produce the whole thing with nudging questions to get people sparked back onto thinking about it, and you have a course at the end. Now that is sophisticated, and I've seen a range of companies producing this stuff, and the result is you've got a course you can produce at the click of a button. Done at its best, it is brilliant. Done at its worst, it is awful. And I think that's where the rub comes. So here's the question. Is it revolutionary? And I think the answer is kinda. I think, honestly, I've put the assets mark on our revolutionary scale here to the left. I think the issue is we can create so many assets so cheaply using ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. Quite possibly what we're doing is worse than the original state. It's like a bad printed out copy of it. But it doesn't have to be on the far left-hand side. Some of the assets you can produce, if there's sufficient human control, can be brilliant. The video stuff I'm putting in the middle right now, I think it's just doing old things better, but I am concerned there's going to be a glut of videos being produced. When the amount of cost it took to produce a video in the past was enormous. Now you can simply write a script, give it to the engine, and it will produce everything for you. The voice, the video, the graphics, everything. And then you need to have the human in the loop. But even doing that, you can create an awful lot of stuff far, far quicker, orders of magnitude faster. My concern is it's going to be like PowerPoint in 2002. Suddenly, everyone's going to be producing stuff, and it's not going to be good. So there needs to be a real focus on instructional design there. But the courses stuff, yes, I think that's evolutionary. I think we've got stuff that's really brilliant. As I said, some of it can be awful, but some of these courses that I've seen produced, Area 9, I have no financial interest in Area 9. Area 9 do a fantastic job of producing these courses. So too do Labs and other organizations. Links at the end. That, I think, is evolutionary, and it's on the edge of being revolutionary. It's something we should absolutely look out for. I'm aware that I've been spending 10 minutes on content, and that's quite a lot, but content's important, and it's still very much the core of what we do in L&D. I'm going to be going faster through the rest of the stuff to give us time at the end for chat and discussion, and I hope also this is priming your minds for thinking about, what does this mean for me? Let's look at adaptive delivery. Again, that was brought up at the beginning when we talked about what are the key areas of learning tech. The idea has always been we're going to start at one point, finish at the end, and we're going to get people from here to there almost immediately with perfectly delivered content. You can do this if you've got one-to-one human tutoring from an absolute expert in the subject and also is a great tutor. And this, of course, is Bloom's 2 sigma problem. We know that 98% of people, according to Bloom's experiments, and it's been reproduced, who receive one-to-one tuition, the 98% do better than the median of everyone who's trained in a regular class. So that's the 2 sigma problem. How do you get those 2 orders of change over for everybody? Because one-to-one is not scalable. So adaptive courses try to solve this problem. Now, the problem is at the moment, courses are produced which are a bit like this. You start at the beginning, you go through to the end, and you have to pick up a few points on the way because you've got to cover that stuff, even if people already know it or they're not interested or whatever. It's a bit like going on a tour of London. If I went on a tour of London, I'd like to see some things I've seen before, some new things, but there are some things I don't want to see. I don't want to see Monument. I've done that before. I don't want to see the Westfield Shopping Centre, but the tour might take us there, and then we end up at the end. Everyone has the same suboptimal route. The promise of adaptive learning is that you start off at the same point, you end up at the same point, but you have a different, unique, tailored experience for everybody on that route. Now, I've seen people doing this, and again, Area 9, Labs, Realize It, Magma Learning, lots of organizations offering this stuff. And honestly, if we ask ourselves, is this revolutionary or not? Is it solving an age-old problem in learning and development? And is it doing it well? For me, the answer is yes. Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody, we have a winner. I absolutely believe that adaptive learning is one of the things which is genuinely revolutionary about what this wave of new technology is offering. Interestingly, the companies that are doing it well didn't start on November the 30th last year with ChatGPT. They've been doing this for years and developing the expertise around it. So adaptive delivery, and I call it adaptive delivery, not adaptive learning, because the learning takes place inside people. The delivery is what we're in charge of, helping people get to that stage. What about curation? Now, curation is the third of my list on the left-hand side of technologies. Curation, super important, very difficult to do. I thought I want to find a diagram that explains curation. I went to Google. I said, well, give me a schematic or something to explain course curation. And I was so disappointed with the results. They all seem to say, well, curation, look at that one on the top left. You find stuff, you curate it, and then you share it. Well, that's not explained to me what curation is. I mean, curation, we know, is the ability to find what's common amongst different things, synthesize it, analyze it, and then share it in a way that makes sense to people and helps them learn about it. And very importantly, we said, as we heard right at the beginning in the chat here, to get rid of the noise. There is so much noise going on. There is so much extra information that we need help to cut stuff away. And this is particularly true if you're a large organization and you have libraries of content which run to hundreds of thousands of materials. As well as that, of course, you've got the material you create internally. And this is voiced very well by Pratima Talapatra of Ericsson. She says, there's no way You can clean up the content as fast as people create content. And it's not just the libraries you've got. All the stuff internally in the organization is valuable, but how do you find the right stuff? Some organizations are doing a good job here. Some organizations claim to be doing a good job. Some organizations are really a bit all over the place and they're just claiming to do it. I am involved with a company I'm not going to mention here that does curation, does a really good job with curation. That's in the notes. Anybody who's offering any sort of library now offers curation in some form or another, but it has to be quick, it has to be sophisticated, and it has to boil things down not to 100 answers, but ideally something like 10 answers. If you want to know about how to handle a difficult conversation as a manager, you don't need 100 assets on that. You need 5 to 10 assets that's going to help you do your job well and is aligned to what the organization wants, what you want. And for me, that's the key marker of success with this. I have to say at the moment, I'm not even going to ask if this is revolutionary or not. There isn't a spectrum I can put this on because there's such a wide range of offerings. I don't think it's even possible to mention, to say that we are revolutionary yet. I think we will get there because it's so important. Behavioral impact, our old friend Herming Ebbinghaus and the forgetting curve. Is it important? Yes, it is. We are taught stuff, we remember stuff, we want to remember stuff, and it fades away. Here's my example that I always use. When I was living in Turkey, you can see how I produced a little book where I had in it the words I wanted to learn. I grouped them. I used my little calendar from a coach company to cover the words up. And on the right-hand picture, you can see I gave myself a program of days in which I was going to go back 1 page, 2 page, whatever, and learn stuff. It worked. Now you've got Duolingo to do this. The truth is that the behavioral impact that you can get from reminding and nudging people after that. So I'll just go back to the forgetting curve. This is the forgetting curve classically that Ebbinghaus came up with, but it has been reproduced. If you learn something formally, you will forget it over time unless you put it into use and unless you repeat it, unless you have repeated exposure to it. And so all the behavioral impact tools that I'm seeing out there are doing something very simple, sometimes just with text messages. Arist, for example, in Northern America, does a great job of helping people after a course. Noli, based in Sweden, same thing. After a course, just reminding people, oh, what about this? What about that? A Canadian company, Axonify, does a great job of sending microlearning to people to remind them about things. And it absolutely works, and you can prove it. Now, is this revolutionary? No, not really. It's doing old things better, but I don't care. The impact of doing old things better is so large, I don't care that it's not revolutionary. It has a huge effect on how people learn. And if we're not using some of these easily available tools now to remind people about what they've learned and to nudge them to good behaviors, then we're not doing our jobs. It's not sexy. Typically, it's not very grand. You don't have to spend a lot of money even on these tools. There are so many out there now. I would absolutely say it's execution. We're doing the old things better, but the old things were done so badly, trying to remember to repeat things to people after a course, or just for me, learning Turkish very arduously. The new way of doing things is so much better. It is fabulous. So, not a revolution, but I don't care. It's doing a great job. We are on time. We're halfway through my list of things. Halfway through, more than halfway through. Technologies we've looked at, the methodologies here. Thank you very much for all the stuff coming through here. Now, look, Ebbinghaus used gobbledygook, says Joan. Yeah, of course he did. And I'm not going to get into a whole conversation about whether he used gobbledygook. He did. But it doesn't mean that his memory experiments were wrong. If you try to learn a language, then you need to have some way of remembering things which are gobbledygook, because the first time you learn that, I don't know, to discover in Turkish is keşfetmek, there is no way that means anything. It's not like découvrir in French. So there is a real need to learn something that is gobbledygook. How do you make it work? By repetition and by spaced repetition over time. Let's look at the methodologies here, which, as I said earlier, are larger, more complex, and really quite important for that reason, and there are lots of caveats around this, and they tend to involve quite large implementations, particularly for skills management. Now, the promise of skills management is that in the past, we've not really known if people can do a job or not. We've not known if they have the skills, knowledge, and so on. So we guess at people's skills. Have they done it in the past? Have they got the experience? Do they have a qualification for it? What tasks can they do? The idea with skills management, I'm summarizing this, typically driven with AI, is that you have a skills taxonomy or ontology in the middle, which enables us to understand without too much input from the person, because that's the slowing down piece. Without too much input, we understand what somebody can do, and we understand what the gap is between their current skills and knowledge and their current job, and their current skills and knowledge and any future job. From this idea, we are able to provide an organization with a view of where should we be going in the future to have the capabilities we need for the future, and where can we have not just people's individual skills developed for that, but their whole careers managed. So it's more than just about learning and development. Where are we with this? Well, is it revolutionary? I think skills management at the moment is probably in the execution phase. It's doing things well. It will be a revolution if it works. My concern about skills management is twofold. Firstly, people are more than just skills. And the problem with skills management is often it tends to reduce people to skills. Secondly, it is a huge task and involves a vast amount of technical and procedural infrastructure to get people to understand to use these systems well. Now, having said that, some people are doing it well. So Deutsche Post DHL, Meredith Willard there, doing a fabulous job with the system that she's using just to get people moving up through their careers within Deutsche Post DHL. And it absolutely works for them. The other companies on here are doing similar things. Unilever, Schneider Electric, Walmart famously have huge implementations around this. Ericsson are doing stuff as well. And it works for them. So there's lots of evidence that it can work. My concern is still there's been a lot of over-promising or big promising with skills management, and I think we've yet to see exactly where we land with it. So I think it's not revolutionary yet. If we get it right, it will be, and I'll be the first to say hurrah. I'm not going to spend much time on analytics and reporting. I just want to point us back to Danny. Danny Johnson says, look, I love that first paragraph. I spent the summer learning about the learning technology provider landscape. It's pretty nuts out there. I love that. Look, here's her biggest takeaway. 89% of providers are offering some sort of analytics and measurement functionality. The functionality is here. For me, this is not really going towards the revolutionary end of the scale. This is just doing the old things better. And it's like so many things right now, there's a lot of this. You can really do analytics. You can gather in data. You can use APIs to link together your learning management system and your business systems to understand really the impact you're having. That isn't the problem. The issue is, do we have the skills within learning and development to do it? And I suspect at the moment, the answer, unfortunately, is no, we don't have the skills. But the skill is not, are you a data analyst? Can you do a SQL query? The skill is really, are you able to have the diplomatic skills to get access to that information you need? And then secondly, is it possible to then ask questions of that data which are sensible in terms of the business? That's quite important. So I think for us here, I'm not going to go, is it revolutionary or not? For me, this is something which is not revolutionary yet, but a bit like behavioral impact, can have a huge impact on what we do, provided we just get the skills and use it. With coaching, I want to quickly just go through this idea that coaching sounds like it's a very simple thing. We're going to use AI to coach people. Two diagrams I want to show you. Firstly, that there is lots of brilliant coaching stuff out there. Just be aware that some of it will be focused on the individual, some of it on the team, some of it will have fixed content, typically leadership and sales, some of it will have fluid content. And obviously, each of these is aimed at something else. And actually, I've seen great instances in all of these. But just for a moment, let's look at what the role of AI might be if we use that with coaching. And I've seen that, and actually it's pretty astonishing. If we look at the spectrum of things that we could do with involving AI with coaching, on the left-hand side, well, let's not use any AI at all. And on the right-hand side, your coach is just an algorithm-driven chatbot. Actually, obviously, we have great coaches on the left. On the right-hand side, potentially, we have the solution to Bloom's 2 sigma problem. The fact that individual one-to-one tuition by an expert is a great way of getting them skilled up. But there are issues around this, issues around ethics in particular. You don't want somebody talking to a chatbot, imagining the chatbot understands them and is a person, even though they've been told otherwise, and then forming a relationship which the chatbot, at the very least, can't support, and it could be much worse. So there are real issues around mental health and safety here. But there's no doubt that already on the right-hand side, this stuff is doable. You can absolutely have an algorithm-driven chatbot. Even more powerful, actually, to me, is the one in from the right-hand side. An algorithm-driven coaching with a human in the loop. You've got an experienced coach who is using AI to support them in what they're doing and teaching, training, coaching, not just, I don't know, a few people a week, but tens or hundreds of people through that. Now, potential there, if we can get it right, is enormous. This has been growing for the last 5 years. For me, it's one of the most exciting areas. I always point people towards M coaching, done by Emma Webber in Australia, as my exemplar of this. Again, link in the files, in the slides at the end. And I would say at the moment, it's doing old things in a new way, but it's teetering on the edge of being revolutionary. It's so much going on there. And the great thing about that is it's immediately understandable by anybody in the organization. Skills-based talent management is great, but you have to spend a lot of work convincing leaders about what it actually means. Everyone knows what coaching means. And if you tell them, we can do it better, potentially, we can certainly do it cheaper and wider, then you've got somebody listening to you. So that's a reason why I think it's going to be one of the explosive approaches to learning and technology in probably the next couple of years. That's what we've had a look at. I want to move on now to consistency. And I apologize, I know I've been going very fast through this, but you're smart people. I know you listen fast. I know from the way the chat's been going that people have been responding and maybe agreeing, disagreeing, arguing with me, whatever. Andrew will pick that up in about 5 minutes. But I want to just look at consistency at the end. Because for all of these grand technologies, there are a couple of things that we should bear in mind. Firstly, by Global Sentiment Survey, I ask everybody each year, what's your biggest L&D challenge? And this year, 40% of people answered it, same as last year. And they answered in 18,000 words, which is more than Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. So basically, I have to read a book of people's miserable experiences each year and what they're not happy about, what their biggest challenges are. You can put the challenges into these buckets, and these buckets are pretty much the same buckets as we had last year. And if we look at the notable words that were used in these challenges and how people express them this year versus last year, what's very interesting is that where people differ enormously in what they think is a hot technology, what they're excited about internationally, country to country, it's always different. What the challenges are remains remarkably consistent. And we can see that the challenges more this year than last year were budget, value, and impact. And because last year's survey is dominated still by the pandemic, all those words came down. What we're seeing here is that although we still think technology is great and there are revolutionary things happening, showing value, showing impact, being able to secure the budget remains an important priority, actually growing this year in comparison with last. But the other thing, so that's one point of consistency. The other point of consistency I want to point out is that while we often say technology is going to make a huge change, it's a big differentiator, it will put us ahead of the competition. And I think there are problems for L&D certainly in considering what our jobs are going to be like in the future. Are we going to be able to do things Will our jobs be taken away? And actually, yes, some jobs will be fundamentally changed by technology. But technology always begins as a differentiator, but ends as a commodity. I'll say that again at least twice. Begins as a differentiator and ends as a technology. Henry Ford famously introduced the idea of the conveyor belt, of manufacturing on a line so that people didn't move, but the thing being made was moved. Initially, the thing they started with was the magneto, and there it is on the assembly line, one part of a car being produced. That was so successful in reducing the time taken to produce a magneto that they ended up, of course, with the famous assembly line for the Ford cars, initially not on conveyor belts, but being pulled on ropes between people, men, working at stations. That enabled Henry Ford to reduce the cost of a Model T by 30%. That was a huge, huge advantage for him. So Ford grew vastly until, of course, the other manufacturers caught up. And then suddenly the assembly line wasn't a differentiator, it was a commodity. If you wanted to be in car manufacturing, you had to have one. All these technologies are the same. What begins as something that's astonishing and will change everything will eventually, and it won't take long, become a commodity. We will get used to a landscape in which AI is not exciting, because like electricity, which was exciting in the 1920s, it's almost immediately, becomes part of the landscape, bedded into what we do. So we can expect to be working in a world in 2 years' time where AI isn't remarkable, but we have new, different AI-supported learning and development jobs that we do. What started as a differentiator becomes a commodity, and in the end, it's the human in the loop. It is us as people. It's the people that make the difference. So for all of this revolutionary change and fervor and excitement, and some of it very justified, it always will come down to people, and it will come down to us in learning and development to do the right job in supporting people in their learning. I've got through a lot of content very quickly. I'm going to pass over to Andrew now to see if there's any questions. And meanwhile, there are the links for the slides. Can we just keep the QR code up for a second so that people can actually see those? Thank you very much. Andrew, have we got any... I need a drink, but while I'm getting a drink, Andrew, could you just find some questions and throw them through while we keep the QR codes up just for a moment? Then we'll go to both of us on the screen. Andrew, what have we got?
Loads of questions and comments
I'm sure.
and stuff coming in. There's the chat has been firing backwards and forwards, like we said.
I normally keep it fast. I thought, no, I'm going to leave that to Andrew.
Projectors and stuff. So yeah. Just picking out some of the questions. There's some. Kay says she doesn't do QR codes, so we'll have to post those links into the chat.
I'm going to put the links into the chat. I'll do that. Well, okay, fair enough. You don't do QR codes. Let me put the links into the chat. Andrew, go ahead.
So some of the questions. So let's pick up. So Teresa Rose mentioned AI talking about learning styles. So there's a question there around bias and accuracy, around potentially using some of these tools and technology in the future.
Sure.
Which I think is interesting. Interesting question from Edwin saying, are the biggest winners from all of this the software companies, or is that just a little bit cynical?
Trust me, I do a lot of work with software companies and so on. It is a fiercely competitive market. I think that the risk is huge for them. Some will win. Some will win. Some will be horrendously underpowered and will just start too early or go in the wrong direction. No, I think the biggest winners are the people who use these tools successfully to support their learning. Yeah, absolutely. And some people make some money out of it for sure. I've got a couple of links there which I'm going to put into the chat. Here's
I'm ahead of you. Oh,
you've done it already? Okay, there you go. Thank you very much. Good.
Oh, there we are.
Sorry, that's the...
There we go.
That's very interesting. I've got Suze, I think, has downloaded a presentation I gave yesterday in Paris, which is great. You're welcome to have it, but it's not that one. Let me just Andrew, let's carry on with this, and then
carry on
let's
with the
answer some
Q&A and
questions.
sort out the things after.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love this question from Steve Thompson. I think this is a bang on. Are organisational learning cultures, in inverted commas, and environments developing at the same rate to support the new revolution of learning technology?
Well, no, obviously they're not. I mean, sorry, it's a great question, and you're right to ask it. People are definitely going to be caught on the hop by the difficulties of adapting to this, and it's not really about the technology. Remember, going from the transistor to the iPod, it's particularly the behaviours and the processes internally that you need to have to support a new way of doing things. Now, what's interesting is that some of those organizations that are doing the skills management piece are really big. Walmart, Unilever, these are companies with 150, 200,000 people working for them. And yet they are managing to do substantial amounts of change. So it's not just a matter of size of company. So some organizations are doing a great job of shifting themselves. But in those companies, the changes come from the top. It's the companies where you've got senior buy-in where you're able to make a change. If you haven't got that, then I think you have got an issue.
Thank you. Let me have a look. We've got questions around... the question around the video that you did, Don. So to what extent do you still have control over your own moving image and voice? Assuming there are recordings from you out there, or has that ship sailed?
I see. I see the point. So in other words, when you say control, you don't mean control in manufacturing. Okay. I'm putting the correct link into the for that presentation is into the chat now. Sorry about that. Apparently, I've managed to put the wrong link up. But that is the correct link up now for everybody. So the correct link is now in the chat. Thanks for flagging that. This always happens, but it can happen. And I'll make sure that going forward, if anybody looking at the recording, that the correct link is on the website. I did check it, so obviously I've just rushed to the checking. Sorry, the question was, do you have control over it? The same issue. There are a number of things here. Do you have control of yourself when the thing is being produced? Yes, a certain amount of control over what happens. Do you have control over what happens to you after the video is produced? No, not if it's on the internet. But it's the same with every video of yourself. Same with every image of yourself, that you have no control of what happens to it. So it's not really a matter of whether it's produced by AI or not. But I do think it's something we need to be wary of. And I actually have reduced quite a lot the number of selfies I put of myself out there, just because I don't want too many people grabbing an image of myself and using it for whatever. So yes, there is less control, and we need to be aware that the rules of copyright, they still kind of apply, can be and will be broken.
Really smart question here from Hiroko. With the spread of generative AI, there will be a certain number of people who will lose their jobs. However, during the era of the Luddite movement, handicraft people lost their jobs, but new jobs were created. What kind of jobs do you think will be created with the spread of generative AI?
Fabulous question. Thank you. Look, let's not do the dirty on the Luddites, right? If you were, and this is in the early 18th century in the UK, the introduction of jacquard loom technology from France into the UK led to you had highly skilled workers working in looms in their cottages producing fabrics. And it was a highly skilled trade. It took you a long time to learn. You supported your entire family doing it. And those jobs went in a matter of a year. So it's a huge transition. No wonder they were angry. No wonder they took sledgehammers to the machines, right? So I don't want to do the dirty on the Luddites. And there are people right now who are not able to work as much as they were working last year because generative AI has taken away their jobs. So let's take it seriously. What new jobs will be created? I was talking to somebody the other day who's working in the field of providing services around learning for their clients, right? So they outsourced a really wide range of projects. They said, and this was early this year, they said in 2022, the issue was that the high-end instructional designers they had couldn't get work because mid-level instructional designers were doing the work cheaper. Now, the high-end instructional designers are all being the human in the loop, providing really high level view of, is this working or is it not working? How can we improve what's being produced? It's the mid-level designers who are having difficulties. So there will always be a job for someone who is highly skilled in an area. There'll always be niche work that's available. So at the moment, we talk about the production of content for all manner of things. You may be able to be a specialist in the production of content in a particular domain, which secures your work in the future, even if you're not an expert in a particular, in producing content as a whole. You're an expert in producing content in that area because you know all about it. That's one obvious niche that will survive in the future. There will be other ones that we can't predict. And I'm thinking, if you look at the integration of data into things, the idea that we're going to be able to have a much better idea about how people are interacting with what the content that's produced, how they learn from it, are they then putting it to use? How does that feed back into a loop where we say, right, well, we've discovered that so this particular percentage of people are doing things in a different order, and that's actually more productive. Let's suggest that everybody does that, and let's go and see what effect that has on the then application of that in the workplace. All of that sounds fuzzy at the moment, but it's absolutely becoming possible. And that ability to handle data around learning and ask good questions around it is going to become much more fundamental in the future than it is now, not because it's not important now, but simply because we can't do it. Very long answer, but great question.
There's a really good HBO IdeaCast podcast series where they look at 3 areas around generative AI, and the first one talks about, well, actually people who will lose their jobs will be the people who don't understand how to incorporate it within their jobs, and that's the idea around it. If you ignore it, then then your job will become superfluous. It's how you can incorporate it. We've got a minute and a half sort of left, so something like that. So 2 questions. Madeline,
2 questions in 1.5 minutes. Blimey, go on.
Yeah. We see companies reframing their learning to now only be seen through skills management. Is this a dangerous approach?
Yes, because we know that what matters with learning more than anything else is motivation. And if you see people as inconvenient, wet bundles of skills to be applied at a particular point in the company, you're omitting everything else that makes a person a person. So I am very concerned about that.
Second question from Mark, which I don't think you're going to be able to answer in time, is what are the ethical implications of emerging learning technologies? How can we ensure they're used responsibly and ethically?
By being humans, as long as we retain common sense and look at things properly and look at, for example, the images produced. One image might look right, but if you look at a series of images, you'll see that typically images produced of people smiling from Midjourney are all actually Americans smiling. It sounds a bit strange to say, but if you look at them, they do not reflect the smiles that happen in different cultures. So it requires us to remain human and to remain sensitive to what's going on the one hand. And on the other hand, if we want to use AI ethically, we also need to consider the carbon footprint of increasing amounts of server time being spent handling all of the stuff we're doing, because that's not inconsiderable either. So we need to be human and mindful of the environment we're in. Andrew.
And we're at time. Thank you, Don. That was outstanding. The chat, well done, everybody, because these sessions.
Great chat.
Lots of
great chat. Thank you.
And brilliant chat and some smart questions. And again, there's some questions we didn't get to as well. So apologies if we didn't get to some of your questions. It was firing around. There was loads in there. And the comments coming through the chat are all saying the same. Thank you. Really good session. Really informative, Don. So well done. Thank you.
I always say it's the end of a presentation, but let's make it the beginning of a conversation. So please, I'm Donald H. Taylor everywhere, but on LinkedIn in particular. So if you just look up Donald H. Taylor on LinkedIn and you say, Don, you didn't answer this question. I disagree with you. What about this? What about that? Fire it at me on LinkedIn. Let's continue the conversation. Now I'm going to shut up, sit back, have some more water. And we've got the next one up at 12 o'clock. Is that right, Andrew? 1 hour's time?
It is 12 o'clock. Yeah, we've got a couple of people from Thrive talking about, again, partly to do with the AI piece, but also how's that going to impact on learning design.
Brilliant. Really important topic. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much, everybody.